The Quality Review and Exchange System for Tribes, or QREST, is an open source software, and by open source what I mean is that it is free to tribes. The code is freely available. There will be no licensing fees. There are some fees that ITEP will bear for maintenance and cloud storage, but this is an open source cloud-based software that allows tribes to stream or import their data into it and use the features for data review, validation, and AQS submittal, as well as summary statistics. So this is the public page of QREST, and you just go to QREST.net. And these are the tribes, not all of whom are streaming data in, but have worked with us to configure the program. So it is going to be always being updated. We will maintain QREST, and it is designed for you. So there may be features that you want to see in it, and we're very interested in staying up to date with your needs, as well as staying up to date with EPA, AQS codes, etc. So this is the public site, and you can see that there are tribes that are participating. For example, Yerington Paiute tribe, if you click on that, and this information, even the location, is only available if the tribe has checked a box saying that they want their data sent to the public website and available. They can also have their data sent to Air Now or not. They could just use the features of QREST and not use it to share data, whatever their preference. So you can go to QREST.net and look at the data that is now streaming in, for example, from the Yerington Paiute tribe. This is just the summary of today's data as it comes in, and that's an example of how you can quickly go to the site and see information that's pertinent to your program. There's a secure dashboard, and only users who have the rights to view data in this secure dashboard will be able to access this. You can see that there are more tribes that we've worked with that are not streaming their data to the public site, or we don't have data streaming in yet. We're just beginning to work with their kind of data logger. Right now we have tribal agencies set up that have data coming from Sutron and Xeno and One Met Station data logger, and we hope to expand that. That actually is the most difficult part of this, is the connecting to the data logger, but we've been successful with 2 commonly used data loggers. So this is the dashboard, and you won't see all of these. I am the QA reviewer right now for all of these agencies, so when you log in you wouldn't see all of these, but let's just take a look at one of them so you could see what would be on this dashboard where you could access your data quickly. So Yerington Paiute is site 2012, and you could see the wind speed. That's just an example of the different parameters that are being streamed in. There's information here about the last time it was QC checked. This data has never been submitted to AQS, and that could be useful when you're on a schedule for reviewing your data. But we're just getting started. We have had some successful AQS data submittals, and we are working on extensive training for using QREST. So there is documentation, and we have a pretty extensive user's guide that's available online and also as a Word copy. So we're working on documentation and training, but it is fully functional. So let's just take a look at some of the features that it has. So the navigation tree on the left shows the different organizations, and as you can see, my access level is QA reviewer, except for our ITEP agency, which is our Met Station, and I'm the site operator for that. Then we've got different sites, and again, this would just show your sites, not all of these, but just to show you how this works and some of the features. If we look at Celine Bethel's Yerington Paiute site, you can see here, this is the site information, so this is all the information, including the AQS site ID, that is needed to ultimately get your data into AQS. These are all the different parameters that she's monitoring for. Although these parameters are being pulled from her site now and the data is continuously coming in as 5-minute data, you can also add a parameter that you only import. So for example, if you have other parameters or you have gaps in your data and you want to import that data into QREST, you can add that. It doesn't have to be pulled. So you can import up to a year's worth of data at a time. Let's take a look at outdoor temperature. So QREST takes the user's data all the way from level 0, and these are these automatic checks that are done by the system, and then they apply flags so you can easily identify them, through the level 1 and the level 2 independent third-party data review, which is a very important feature of QREST, enabling tribes to have somebody else that they grant access to their data to independently review their data, and that allows the data to be used for regulatory purposes. If you don't have a QA reviewer, lots of tribes maybe only one person or even half an FTE, and it's difficult to have somebody review your data unless you have a platform like this where you can easily grant them access, and then they can complete the level 2 independent data review. But this is the level 0, and so you can see that there's the range of minimum to maximum. So let's hope her temperature doesn't exceed that range. The amount change, so from one period to the next, and you could see that you could select either that these limits apply to hourly data or n-minute data, because the data might come in as 5-minute data or 10-minute data or 12-minute data. So you can apply these limits to either the hourly or the n-minute data. And then the number of stuck values. If you have 3 records in a row that come in with the exact same value, there's probably something wrong there, and so QREST will perform these level 0 checks and flag the data accordingly, and you can go in at any time and change these, like by season or whatever's appropriate. So let's go back to the site, and you can also add a monitor even if it's a non-AQS parameter. So for example, if you have a parameter like filter loading or some parameter that you have that isn't a standard AQS parameter, you can add whatever it is. Also, and this is really important and so useful, there are several screens in QREST where you can communicate directly with AQS and not have to export your data here and then import it in through the Exchange network and then to AQS. So this button here, import monitors from AQS, what it does is it queries AQS for this site, and whatever parameters are set up in AQS, this will import them. So for example, if we click that, it says AQS Yarrington Paiute Campbell Ranch Site 2012. Okay, we already did this, but if there are other parameters, and sometimes the easiest thing to do is to go to AQS, establish your parameters once you know all those codes, and then you can easily import it here. Or you can add them here. So we don't need to import any of those. So this is the notification here. Celine is notified by text and by email, whichever she prefers, or both, if any of those ranges or conditions are exceeded, and there may be, or if the data is lost, like if the connection is lost, she'll be notified. Then over here, data connectivity, and this is really cool and fun, configure polling. So this is where the QREST system communicates directly with your data logger, and what this needs is mapping. So right now we know that her data is coming in and the wind speed resultant is coming in column 7, and you have to specify like what your date format is, etc. And if your data are coming in as hourly, or in this case 5-minute data. So we've got drop down boxes right now for Sutron and Zeno, and really all we need to connect are these informations here, the logger source and the port number. In order to map the columns, this is super fun. There's this tiny button over here that has options on it, and you ping connection, and this allows you to ping her data logger just to say, hello, are we connecting? But also, super cool and useful, you can retrieve data. You can retrieve the last several hundred records, and that's super useful to figure out which column is which parameter. So let's do that now, and you can see that communicated pretty quickly. So this is the data that's coming off of her data logger, and you can see it's sort of hard, I mean obviously date, time, but what is what? So we've had some really fun times working remotely with somebody who say we'll have to figure out which column is which, and if they're monitoring PM, well, maybe you should just go light a cigarette under there for a while, and then we keep pinging and pinging, and then we see, oh, I guess it's channel 12 that the particulate matter is coming in on. So things like that, but gradually you can figure out, and most people have some sort of documentation, but this is really a very, very useful feature that we can use to communicate directly with the data logger and see the data right as it's coming out, so then we can understand it. And if you want to make changes or add parameters or take away parameters, that's all possible. Just to take a look at what's available. Sometimes you have to change the parameter code. If your data comes in a different format, then you have to change the column mapping. The rounding of decimals, sometimes that can be really important. And then also advanced options if you have an adjustment factor, which is the case sometimes. So we don't want to do any of those changes. And then this checkbox here, also in the Edit Site panel, enable real-time sharing, and that will send your data, if it's checked, to Air Now and the public web page of QREST. But that can be left unchecked, whatever the preference is. Then we've got the list of monitors, and this shows all the monitors that are connected, and again, I see them, but you would only see your monitors. But you can access the monitors directly here and edit them. So let's take a look at the air data. This is where we get to see some really exciting things. So in air data, the first feature is manual import. You can import the data in what we call the grid format, which is a common format where every hour is a column, and it's just one parameter. Every new row is a day. So some people export their data from whatever they've got that they want it, or there's gaps in their data and they want to import it. Then you can import in that format, or hourly. So there can be multiple parameters in the same file where every record is a new either hour or 5-minute record, and you can have many, many columns for many parameters. And you can import up to about a year's worth of data at a time. It's really incredibly simple. Let's take a look. One of the features that is built into the different parts of QREST is documentation. So you can see in one place all the files that we have imported here for Yerington Paiute. So let's just take a look at that. And you can see that Celine has been generous and allowed me to do some experimentation here. But finally I was successful. I imported 3,728 rows of hourly data. And what's really cool is that you can see right here. So say you import some data and then you import some other data. What was it that I imported? All of that record keeping and logging and even the files themselves are built into QREST so that you can have everything that you need in one place, and it's backed up every night. So just to take a look at what I imported, that just opens up as an Excel file, and this is all the data. I was importing PM10 for 2019. So that's really convenient that QREST builds in this record keeping. So that's manual import. Raw data is a feature that allows you to look at the data relatively quickly. Let's just take a quick look, for example, at Yerington, and you can look at different parameters. You can look at the hourly data or the 5-minute data. The date time box includes commonly chosen selections like today, yesterday, the last 7 days, this month, last month, or a custom range. Let's just take a look at today's 5-minute data for her PM10. And a beautiful graph opens up here. Like with the other graphs in the data review panel, if you hover your cursor over it, shows the date, time, and the value. and then the corresponding data is in a table below. Any of these tables where you see these little gray up-down buttons, you can sort by. So let's say you wanted to see today so far what's the highest concentration. It looks like 75 micrograms per cubic meter, but you can sort by clicking on these and you toggle from lowest to highest and highest to lowest, and yes, about 75.63 micrograms per cubic meter. Of course, it doesn't change the order of the graph because that wouldn't make sense, but then you have to reorder your date times to be in the right order. But you can view any of your parameters relatively quickly in the raw data panel. And then the next step is data review, and this is generally done by the site operator as well as then somebody else who would perform the independent data validation. And at this point, I'm going to go to our training site. So this is QREST-test. And what is super great is that we have this parallel site that we can use as a training site. And I have a backyard met station streaming in, and this is the ITEP agency. And let's see if it's producing any data right now. Well, it wasn't earlier, but we fiddled around with it, and now it's producing data. So what I want to do now is look at the secure dashboard in our test site. So this is refreshed with any changes that we make in QREST get pulled into test, but we can use it to test the features, and I'm going to set it up as a training site for people so that they can understand how things work. So let's go back to the data review feature, and let's look at our site, the KAZ Flagstaff, and let's look at April. And you could see that I have 5 parameters that are being polled that are have this gray title bar that are polling in automatically, and then parameters that I've manually imported are I've got 2 ozone analyzers, and then this instrument test flag because I wanted to test out importing parameters that aren't standard AQS parameters that may be particular to whatever it is that you're monitoring or your equipment. So I imported some mock data for a parameter called instrument test flag. So let's see how this data review feature works. So one of the important things is that you can compare different parameters. Let's compare outdoor temperature versus wind speed, and you may have other parameters that make more sense for comparison. And to do that, you click on Advanced Selection, and it asks, okay, we're looking at outdoor temperature, and you want to compare it with wind speed, so you select that. If we were polling 5-minute data, we could look at the 5-minute data, but it's just 1 hour data. And let's look at the month of April. So for that, I go to a custom range and go back to the month of April. You just easily select it, the beginning and end in that bar, and then say continue. And it takes a minute, and you see 2 stacked graphs. The axes are aligned so you can compare them. And you could see that when this data, something obviously happened to my system here. I've got a big gap. And right before and after, and during, in the case of outdoor temperature, we had some data that were flagged. So when data doesn't meet one of those 3 criteria types, if it's out of range, or it jumps too high from one record to the next, or it is stuck and always repeating the same value for n number of records, whatever you specify, it'll show up as red here, so it's easily seen. And let's say we want to take a look at this particular interval of time more closely. We can rubber band, which is just you just select and hold the left mouse key down, and it snaps to whatever period of time you selected, and that helps you more easily identify, like, was there overlap here, whatever particular thing you're looking at. So let's just go down to where we've got more numbers. Let's say we wanted to select a few of these at once. You don't have to select them one at a time. Press the Shift key down, and then these are selected. We could click bulk, edit selected. So the way this works is there's this basic tab that opens up that's accessible by the site operator. I can apply AQS null value codes. I can add those AQS qualifiers that give EPA information about the data. I can say I'm marking level 1 review complete, or if I were the independent QA reviewer or the site admin, I could mark level 2 complete. And one thing that's really great about QREST is it makes it mandatory to write down what it is that you've done. So if you make any changes here, you have to add them to the notes. And then if you are admin, you see this advanced tab, and you could screen, if you have a larger set and you wanted to remove all the values, for example, -699 or things like that, that is actually an error code. You could filter for that and remove those values, or you could remove all the values within the range that you selected. It makes you go through a little shenanigans because we wanted to make that hard to do, but that is possible, and sometimes that's appropriate. You could add your own flag at this point, or you could remove existing flags. Sometimes you need to change the units because for whatever reason, especially it seems barometric pressure, the units sometimes change, and you need to go back and make sure those units are appropriate for those data points. And again, notes are mandatory. We're not going to make any changes here, so I'm going to say cancel. But I wanted to show you how these notes work. So if you make notes over time, which sometimes happens, especially for a set of data, you can click on the notes column and it opens up a log of all the notes, including whoever made any notes or questions. So a lot of times if you're doing third-party data review, people will have questions about your data, and so this is a way to communicate and record questions and answers, which is important ultimately to anybody who questions your data. And you can download a log of that and you can email it to somebody or save it in your files. But again, all of this information is stored online and backed up every night.
You can also store documentation, such as manuals for your equipment in QREST, or you can store scanned logbook pages. So, for example, I have stored the manual for the weather station in QREST, and then whenever I have questions, I can always go back and access that from wherever I have an internet connection.
So going down the navigation pane, the next is quality control, and that data can be entered, percent differences calculated, and data sent directly to AQS from here. So this is a list for this organization, ITEP, of the QC checks that have been made. Let's add a new one. And the first question is assessment type, because of course there's different information and different amounts of information that's needed depending on whether you're doing a 1-point QC, an annual performance evaluation for gaseous monitors. You know that there are those 10 intervals of concentration, and you have to fill a certain number of those to have the data be accepted as an annual performance evaluation. For continuous PM analyzers, flow rate verification, or a semi-annual flow rate audit, and zero span. So let's just say we're adding a zero span to our ozone analyzer. So we're going to select our POC1 and the assessment date. Let's just say we're entering old data, and you say, okay, this is the type that I'm entering, save, and then it says, okay, since you're doing a zero span, I know that you're going to have to enter the assessment, or like the known or true value, and the monitor or the output value for the span, and also for the zero. It does the calculations for us, and then you can send this directly to AQS. So in the case, for example, of Celine's AQS data, she will be changing this to her screening group and her AQS ID. But the first thing we do is generate the file, and you could see that this lists all the AQS submissions for the organization ITEP, And you have a choice now. You can look at it one more time here. And again, this is all stored. So all these previous AQS submissions, you could just go into QREST and you can open them and you can see exactly what was sent. And then you click Submit to EPA. And as everybody knows, this can take a while. So this runs in the background, and when it's completed, it will say completed. What's really cool is if it fails, it will give you some information about the reason that it failed. But we have this pipeline to AQS working for the QC data, and you can also, if you want to, enter your routine parameter data. Let me show you how that is done. You add a submittal, and then you say, okay, what data do I want to send to AQS? And I just want to send, let's send our wind speed that we were looking at, and we looked at those notes. And this is wind speed. We've got 25 records. We generate the file. And now we can look at the file if we want to, which I think is always a good idea to see these lovely files. Say, yep, that looks like the data that I'm sending. I don't have any null value codes. And submit to EPA. And again, this will run in the background. And I also wanted to show you reports. So right now we have a data export feature where you can export the site information, all that information that AQS needs, all those codes. Or if you wanted to export your monitor information, your polling configurations, which is good data to save, or just your air data, you can download all the data that you have, or you can download specific monitor data.
And this is an example of an export of PM10 data. It's a report for the month of July, and you can see that this is in the grid format where every column is an hour and it's for one parameter. And this is the grid format that you can import into QREST in this format as well. In addition to each hourly value, there's the summary statistics, max, min, average, sample standard deviation, and percent completeness or capture rate. And if you want to check QREST out, open up a web browser and search for QREST.net, and you can see the public web page. It will first, if you haven't logged in, it will have a splash page that asks you if you want to join QREST and be affiliated with a tribal air agency, or you are just a member of the public and would like to view this public page. If you're interested in finding out more information about it, please email me or my supervisor, Christopher Lee at nau.edu. So we'd be happy to explain what tools are available for your needs in QREST. And like I said, this is open source, so there will be no licensing fees. ITEP will maintain this and pay the cloud storage costs. And we want to hear about what you want to see, what tools would make your work easier and more streamlined. It'll be an always evolving project. Thank you so much.